Close your eyes and drift back to the 1970s. The crackle of a vinyl record spinning in the corner, the soft clink of milk bottles waiting on the doorstep, the rattle of a Ford Cortina engine starting up on a Sunday morning. Life moved at a different rhythm, slower, simpler, but filled with moments we didn't realize were special at the time. If you remember the glow of a single-family TV, or the endless afternoons playing Kerby in the street until the lampposts flickered on, you already know these weren't just habits, they were the fabric of everyday Britain. But one by one they slipped away. Today, we're revisiting 10 everyday things Brits did in the 70s that vanished forever. Let's see how many you remember. In the 1970s, the family phone wasn't a pocket-sized lifeline, it was a single object, often planted firmly in the hallway, usually heavy, with a solid rotary dial and a coiled cord that always seemed to tangle. It was both a practical tool and a centerpiece of daily life. If you were waiting for a call, you didn't scroll or text to pass the time. You sat close by, perched on the stairs or leaning against the wall, ears pricked for that sharp mechanical ring. Privacy was rare. Parents listened in from the next room. Siblings teased you if it was a friend, or worse, a teenage crush, on the other end. And there was the ritual of dialing, the whir and click of each number spinning back into place, a rhythm that became second nature. For many, the landline carried life's milestones, grandparents calling on Sunday evenings, a best mate phoning to arrange kickabouts, employers offering job interviews, that rush of nerves as you picked up, heart thumping, never knowing exactly who would be on the line. It was anticipation, connection, and sometimes frustration, especially if someone else hogged the phone for ages. But as the decades passed, the waiting game ended. Cordless phones brought mobility, mobiles brought privacy, and eventually, smartphones made the hallway landline all but obsolete. Today, many homes no longer have one at all. Still, for those who lived through it, the memory lingers. That sharp ring, the coiled cord twisted in your fingers, the thrill or dread of hearing a voice on the other end. It wasn't just a phone, it was a shared stage for everyday life in the 70s. Before loyalty cards and supermarket points, there were green shield stamps, little sticky tokens that became part of everyday life in the 1970s. Every time you shopped, you'd be handed a strip of stamps at the till. They weren't glamorous, but they were treasure. Families collected them like currency, carefully sticking them into thick, green-covered books. The ritual was familiar. Kids sat around the table on a Sunday afternoon, tongues poking out in concentration as they licked stamp after stamp, pressing them onto the faintly gluey pages. The books grew heavier, filled with promise. Then came the excitement of the catalogue, a thick, glossy book crammed with everything from kettles to prams to radios. Families flipped through together, circling the items they dreamed of buying with stamps instead of cash. For many households, green shield stamps turned shopping into something more. It was about saving, about stretching money further, about working towards something bigger. Maybe you remember your parents proudly cashing in books for a new toaster, a shiny set of cutlery, or even a piece of furniture. The rewards weren't just products, they were milestones, symbols of patience and persistence. But like so many 70s rituals, the scheme faded. By the 1980s, credit cards and new loyalty systems began to take over, and green shield stamps quietly disappeared. The catalogs were closed, the books left unfinished, and a whole generation's sticky-fingered pastime went with them. Still, the memory lingers, the faint chemical taste of the stamps, the family excitement of choosing from the catalog, the sense that, with enough saving, you could turn those little green squares into something real. A vanished ritual of thrift and reward, now remembered with fond nostalgia. Before 24-hour television, before endless channels and streaming, there was silence on the screen, and into that silence stepped the test card girl. If you grew up in the 1970s, you'll remember her, a young girl in a hairband, sitting at a blackboard, chalk in hand, smiling as she played noughts and crosses with a slightly eerie toy clown. Behind her stretched bright geometric shapes, a kaleidoscope of color frozen in time. For children, the image was strangely captivating. You'd switch on the television early in the morning, hoping for cartoons, and instead there she was, staring back, unblinking. Sometimes the picture was accompanied by a droning tone or light classical music, filling the room with a peculiar atmosphere. Many recall it as oddly comforting, others found it unsettling, but everyone remembers it. The test card wasn't just an image, it was the pause between programs, the waiting room of television itself. Families saw it while the set warmed up, before the evening news, or during gaps in daytime schedules. In an age with only 3 channels, it became an accidental companion, a face stitched into the fabric of everyday life. And then, like so much of the 70s, it vanished. As broadcasting expanded into 24-hour schedules, the test card girl quietly disappeared. New generations would never know the strange stillness of those moments, the anticipation as you waited for the announcer's voice or the start of a show. For those who grew up with her, though, she's unforgettable. That smile, that clown, that odd sense of being watched while you waited for life to flicker back onto the screen. She wasn't just a test card, she was part of childhood itself. In the 1970s, the rhythm of British mornings was marked not by the ping of a smartphone alarm, but by the quiet hum of an electric milk float rolling down the street. Long before supermarket plastic cartons, milk arrived in sturdy glass bottles, clinking softly together in their crates as the milkman made his rounds. The memory is vivid, opening the front door to find bottles waiting, beads of condensation on the glass, their foil tops gleaming silver, gold, or red in the morning light. Sometimes birds had already pecked through the foil, stealing a sip of cream from the top. Children remember rushing out in their slippers to collect them before breakfast, often sneaking a fingertip into the thick cream layer that rose naturally above the milk. Milk delivery wasn't just about the product, it was about community. The milkman was a familiar face, greeting families with a smile, collecting empties to be washed and reused. For parents, it meant peace of mind, fresh milk for tea, cereal, or school lunches, arriving daily without fail. For children, those bottles were a fixture of family life, clinking on the doorstep like a promise of normalcy. But by the 1980s and 90s, supermarkets began to dominate. Cheap plastic cartons and bulk shopping pushed out the daily ritual. Milk floats grew fewer, their quiet hum replaced by delivery lorries and car parks filled with trolleys. Slowly, the bottles disappeared from doorsteps, taking with them the simple charm of that morning ritual. Today, a handful of milkmen still exist, but the sight is rare. For most, it survives only in memory. The clink of glass, the sparkle of foil, the taste of cream on a cold finger, a vanished sound of Britain waking up. For anyone who went to school in the 1970s, the canteen was unforgettable. It wasn't just about the food, it was the ritual of queuing up, metal trays in hand, waiting to be served whatever the dinner ladies had prepared that day. The trays themselves are etched into memory, heavy, clattering metal with little compartments divided up for meat, potatoes, vegetables, and of course pudding. The meals were a mixed bag. Some remember them with fondness. Hearty roast beef, lumpy mashed potatoes, peas that rolled into every corner of the tray. Others shudder at the thought of soggy cabbage, gristly mince, or fish fingers that had seen better days. But no one forgets the puddings. Pink custard, semolina with a blob of jam, sponge cake that steamed as it hit the plate. For many children, pudding was the highlight, the sweet reward after enduring the main course. There were the smells too, a mingling of boiled veg, gravy, and disinfectant from the freshly mopped floors. The din of hundreds of children scraping chairs, clattering cutlery, and chattering over their meals. And the dinner ladies, part strict guardian, part comforting presence, ladling food with a no-nonsense efficiency that kept the line moving. School dinners weren't gourmet, but they were part of growing up. They taught you to eat what you were given, to swap desserts with your mates, and to treasure the days when chips made a rare appearance. By the 1980s, plastic trays and healthier menus began to replace the old compartmentalized system. The era of those heavy, clunky metal trays faded away, along with many of the dishes that defined them. Still, for anyone who ate them, the memory lingers. Pink custard, lumpy mash, and the echo of cutlery on metal trays. Love them or loathe them, they were a rite of passage. For children of the 1970s, Saturday mornings weren't about lying in, they were about the cinema. Across Britain, local picture houses threw open their doors to host Saturday morning cinema clubs, where hundreds of kids poured in for a few hours of adventure, laughter, and pure chaos. The memories are vivid. Queues of children clutching a few coins, the smell of popcorn and ice lollies filling the foyer, the excited chatter as friends jostled to get seats together. Inside, the auditorium buzzed with energy. Cartoons flickered on the screen, cowboy films drew cheers, and when the villains appeared, the whole crowd booed in unison. It wasn't just about the movies, it was about being part of something bigger, a sea of children swept up in the same story. For parents, it was a godsend, a cheap way to keep the kids entertained for a few hours while they did the shopping. For children, it was freedom, a chance to be noisy, to laugh, to share sweets with friends, to feel the thrill of the big screen in a time before home video brought films into living rooms. The clubs also offered a sense of belonging. Many issued little membership cards, badges, or newsletters. Kids proudly wore them, proof that they were part of a special group. For some, it was their first taste of independence, going to the cinema without parents, sitting in the dark surrounded only by peers. But by the 1980s, Saturday morning cinema began to fade. TV cartoons, VHS tapes, and new forms of entertainment kept children at home. One by one, the clubs closed, leaving behind only echoes of those rowdy mornings. For those who remember, the memory still glows. The cheers, the jeers, the excitement of a Saturday morning spent in a world of film and friendship, a vanished ritual of childhood joy. In the 1970s, family cars weren't just transport, they were adventures on wheels. The Ford Cortina and the Mini were kings of the road, instantly recognizable and woven into everyday life. They weren't spacious by today's standards, but that never stopped families cramming everyone inside for a trip. The memories are warm and chaotic. Kids squashed shoulder to shoulder in the back, no seatbelts in sight, legs sticking to vinyl seats on hot summer days, windows rolled down by hand, the rush of air tangling hair as the countryside blurred past. Suitcases strapped precariously to roof racks, flapping tarpaulin covering buckets and spades, signaling a seaside holiday was underway. And always the soundtrack, radios crackling with ABBA, Slade, or the Rolling Stones, voices raised in sing-alongs that competed with the roar of the engine. There was freedom in those cars, Sunday drives with no real destination, trips to the seaside that felt like grand expeditions, children pressed to the glass, spotting landmarks, playing I Spy, or drifting to sleep on long journeys as headlights flickered past. The car wasn't just a vehicle, it was a shared space where memories were made. Safety wasn't top of mind back then. Parents lit cigarettes in the front, the ashtray filling as the miles rolled by. Kids clambered over seats, leaning out of windows, or stretching across laps. It felt normal, carefree, a time before regulations and warnings reshaped family travel. By the 1980s and beyond, laws changed. Seatbelts became compulsory. Bigger cars replaced the Cortinas and Minis, and family journeys felt different. The chaos gave way to order, but perhaps some of the magic slipped away too. For those who remember it, piling into a Cortina or Mini wasn't just travel. It was childhood, family, and freedom, all packed into a noisy, rattling box on wheels. If there's one thing that defined the atmosphere of the 1970s, it was smoke. Thick, swirling, inescapable. Cigarettes were everywhere, woven into the fabric of daily life. In pubs, the air hung heavy with it, a fog lit up by jukebox neon. Offices were filled with the click of typewriters, the ring of landlines, and the constant waft of smoke rising from ashtrays balanced on every desk. Even trains and buses carried the haze, with smoking and non-smoking sections divided only by a flimsy sign. The memories are unmistakable. Parents lighting up after dinner, the clink of a Zippo lid snapping shut, pubs filled with laughter, darts thudding against boards, and a ceiling you could barely see through by last orders. Doctors and teachers smoked openly, a reminder of just how normal it all was. For many, cigarettes were part of the soundtrack of adulthood, glamorous, rebellious, or simply routine. Children remember it too, sitting in the back of the car as smoke curled from the front seats, winding down the window just enough to gulp fresh air, running errands to the corner shop with a note from Mum asking for 20 Benson and Hedges. The smell clung to clothes, hair, curtains, even furniture, a lingering reminder of its presence. But as health campaigns grew louder in the 80s and 90s, attitudes shifted. The dangers of smoking became undeniable, and one by one, restrictions arrived. No more smoking in offices, no more smoking on buses, and finally, the 2007 ban in pubs and restaurants marked the end of an era. For those who lived through the 70s, though, the memory lingers, a world where cigarettes weren't hidden, but ever present, where the haze of smoke wasn't just background, it was part of everyday Britain. In the 1970s, the streets weren't just for cars, they were playgrounds. After school, children spilled out of their houses, turning cul-de-sacs, cobbled lanes, and terraced rows into arenas of imagination and noise. It was freedom, pure and simple, and it defined a generation. The games were endless. Football with jumpers for goalposts, the balls scuffed and worn from hours of kicks against brick walls, games of kerby, where kids bounced balls off pavements to score points, skipping ropes stretched across the road, hopscotch chalked onto slabs, or makeshift bike races where scraped knees were badges of honor. The soundtrack was laughter, shouts, the occasional clatter of a bin lid doubling as a shield or drum. Everyone remembers the rhythm, the sudden dash indoors when mums called from doorsteps, only to re-emerge minutes later with a biscuit or drink. The golden rule was simple: be back by the time the streetlights flickered on. Those flickering lamps were the unspoken clock of childhood, their glow marking the end of play and the start of bedtime routines. There was community in those streets. Neighbors knew each other's children. Older kids looked out for younger ones, and the pavement became a shared stage for growing up. Friendships were forged, squabbles quickly patched over, and the street felt safe because it belonged to everyone. But as cars grew more common, traffic busier, and fears of safety stronger, the tradition faded. By the late 80s, children spent more time indoors, glued to televisions, computers, and later consoles. The shouts of street games grew quieter until they vanished altogether in many places. For those who lived it, though, the memory endures. Scraped knees, chalk dust, and laughter carried on summer air. Playing in the street wasn't just fun, it was freedom, now vanished from childhood. In the 1970s, the television wasn't just another screen in the house, it was the screen. Usually tucked into the corner of the living room, the set was bulky, heavy, and often encased in polished wood. There were no remotes, just chunky dials that clunked as you turned them, and no endless channels, just 3, and later 4. But that limitation created something special. The whole family gathered together, night after night, to share the same programs. The memories are rich. Dad fiddling with the aerial, sometimes wrapping it in tinfoil to stop the picture from rolling. Mum bringing in trays of biscuits and cups of tea. Children sprawled on the carpet, lying on their stomachs, feet kicking in the air, waiting for Morecambe and Wise, the generation game, or the two Ronnies to begin. Laughter filled the room, not just from the TV, but from everyone sharing it together. There was anticipation too. No catch-up, no recordings. If you missed it, you missed it. Families planned their evenings around big shows, and Christmas specials became events that united the nation. The glow of the TV wasn't just light on the wall, it was the hearth of modern Britain, pulling everyone in close. Over time, the ritual faded. More channels, multiple TVs, and eventually on-demand streaming scattered families into separate rooms. The shared laughter, the collective gasp, the hush before a big reveal, those moments grew rare. But for those who remember, the memory is warm and powerful. The hum of the set warming up, the smell of dinner lingering, the sound of theme tunes that everyone knew. Family evenings around one TV weren't just entertainment. They were togetherness, a vanished rhythm of life that made ordinary nights unforgettable. Looking back, these everyday habits of the 1970s weren't just routines. They were the threads that stitched daily life together. Waiting by the landline, licking green shield stamps, fetching milk from the doorstep, or crowding around one TV set. None of it felt remarkable at the time. Yet these small rituals carried meaning. They were moments of family, community, and a simpler pace of life. And then, almost quietly, they vanished. Technology changed. Habits shifted. The world moved on. But while the objects and routines disappeared, the feelings remain. The laughter of children in the street, the glow of the TV, the clink of bottles on a doorstep, they linger in memory, golden and untouchable. If one of these everyday moments stirred something in you, share it in the comments. Your stories are part of this history too. And if you'd like more journeys into Britain's past, subscribe and join us. Together, we'll keep these memories alive.